Before we start, I'd like you to think about 3 questions that you can use as an initial point of focus, or 3 points of focus that you can keep in the front of your mind, or perhaps the back of your mind, and that you can answer part of now, or part of later, or all at once when the answers come to you. Perhaps when you ask yourself, what do some people love about yoga? And so if you've set yourself a task recently, the 3 questions are: 1. What would you like to achieve? 2. What will it feel like when you achieve that? 3. What internal resources will you be drawing on as you're achieving your goal? Now perhaps your answer to answer question 1 is you'd like to have more confidence to face and beat the cravings of smoking so you can easily begin the process and complete it. Or perhaps your answer to answer question 2 is, as you visualize achieving your goal, that you will feel calm, in control, and in harmony with your body and nature. Or if you're not sure of your answer to question 3, or perhaps you feel you need more inner strength, perhaps you simply need to be reminded about your own internal long list of powerful motivational achievements that you can automatically utilize to achieve your goal. And I wonder if you've noticed how some people go into a trance when they drive a car, or look at their old school photos, or think about their first day at school. I remember my first day at school. I wouldn't let go of my mother's hand. I was scared stiff by so many new things. And I remember her laughing and reassuring me. And it did work out. And the next day was a little easier. And I breathed a little easier. And after a while, it wasn't hard at all. And like a baby learning to walk, tense and nervous, taking that first step is the hardest part, the part that takes courage. And a little baby can do it. You did it. And each step after that is easier and easier. And with each step, laugh or sigh with relief. And as you face up to your fear, you feel calm, in control, healthy, and in harmony with your body and nature. And now you can walk without even thinking about it. And perhaps you can remember the fear of learning how to drive. At first it may have been terrifying, and it was difficult controlling your hands and your feet at the same time. And with each lesson you felt more confident and in control of the car, in control of your own body. Confident. A feeling that you can enjoy whenever you face and beat your fears. And now you automatically just go into a trance and just drive without even noticing what your body is doing. And sometimes perhaps ask yourself, how did I get here? And if perhaps you do have dogs that love to walk, and you can enjoy watching and feeling a part of the obvious sheer bliss that the dogs feel when they're out and about, fit and healthy, perhaps on a walk track, or in a park, or around the block, or perhaps at the beach, or swimming in a creek or a dam, or somewhere else. And from the time when they were very timid young puppies, Perhaps you remember slowly becoming more and more confident in their ability to resist diseases. And the dogs quickly learned to be confident in their own abilities and take great pleasure in fearlessly facing whatever they see as threats or challenges. And perhaps you can be confident of their loyalty and protection when you are out and about. And sometimes when you perhaps let your dogs off the leads, you can be confident that they will come back to you when you call them. And that confidence has possibly grown, slowly but surely, since the first time you let them run, off the lead, even out of sight. They know the way back, and you can trust them to do the right thing, giving you a healthy feeling of freedom and confidence. And if you've been in a situation before that was very helpful, very powerful, very calming, perhaps wonderful for your health, perhaps you can utilize that in the future. And that feeling can be very useful to you. And perhaps you can ask yourself, what do some people love about yoga? And if you love something like yoga or meditation or something else, perhaps you can ask yourself, what is it that you love about that? Perhaps it's a wonderful, healthy feeling of freedom and great confidence. Perhaps a euphoric feeling that you can allow yourself to feel as a reward, replacing the perceived threat of facing challenges, or perhaps comforting that other perceived feeling, like an old friend that's always there for you, like a beautiful warm jacket on a cold day. So if you're interested in the idea of quitting smoking by letting yourself go into a trance, perhaps utilize an everyday trance like the one you're in right now, or perhaps go into a deeper and a more comfortable stance. Perhaps sit down or lie down. Possibly close your eyes in a peaceful way and focus on something useful. And perhaps you can feel the comfort in certain parts of your body, and you can feel that comfort spreading, perhaps quite quickly, or maybe ever so slowly to other certain parts of your body. And as you pay attention to that diminishing tension, becoming less and less, and you feel more and more comfortable about your body, at the same time you can notice something changing in how you feel about your world, perhaps more comfortable in your confidence that your body can comfortably handle the challenges of the world. And that reminds me of a story of a lady who wanted to change a habit and create a new habit. This lady wanted to remember to check her answering machine each time she returned home from work, so she didn't miss important messages. So she created a memory link to help her. What she did was visualize herself putting her key in the front door and turning it. And as she visualized turning the key, she imagined that action triggering a reminder message to check her answering machine. And she visualized this process 3 times, and then put it aside and forgot about it. And the next time she opened her front door, she was immediately reminded to check her answering machine. And she'd successfully created a new habit. And another lady, who heard about that story, wanted to give up smoking by breaking the habitual processes. and she knew that she didn't like smoking with her left hand or lighting cigarettes with her left hand. So she created a memory link for when a pack was opened each time to use her left hand. That change triggered a change in attitude, and she was able to smoke less and less, to the point she was able to stop. And it may be possible that you can be reminded, whenever you open a pack, that your right hand can enjoy smoking less and less, and that more and more your left hand can find other things that it would rather do, and possibly later, or perhaps sooner, you can create another useful link that can help you. Perhaps create a link so that a thought like thinking of smoking can lead to another thought like I'd better not, or something else of your own choosing, so that you can choose to change from how you have been thinking to thinking how you would rather think. And quit smoking can be a metaphor for changing a stubborn habit. And you may find it curious that you can give up taking notice of what's going on in various parts of the body when you drive a car, or get to the point where you are no longer willing to be embarrassed by a smoking exhaust pipe. And perhaps now you can give your best friend a lift up the street in your new car, and immediately you can give up allowing yourself to drive a car blowing smoke out of your rear end or out of your front end or any other orifices. And you can look in the rear view mirror of your convertible car and enjoy fresh air in your face, and see that right now it's time to give up trying to stop your hair blowing around. And don't forget not to allow smoking when you're filling up at the gas station. Otherwise you can end your life right now in very dramatic fashion with combustible substances or chemicals exposed to flames in any kind of confined space. And if you've ever seen a car explode after being lit up in flames, perhaps in a movie, I wonder if you'd like to make your own entrancing or inspiring movie scene with a storyboard with 4 scenes you can view quite quickly, over and over, to get a feel for its emotional impact and hopefully dramatic and life-changing impact on its viewers. Powerful scenes based on your own life. And starting on the far left, perhaps scene 1 can be a series of triggers for your car exploding into a smoking fireball. Triggers perhaps related to alcohol, or losing concentration, or going too fast, or being complacent in dangerous situations, or perhaps taking risks and losing sight of the value of your vehicle, or anything else that could lead to possibly your most valuable possession going up in smoke. And just left of centre, perhaps scene 2 can be scenes portraying a powerful, undeniable urge to exercise self-discipline and refuse to allow anything you have control over to do anything that may damage anything else that it is your responsibility to protect, just as a responsible person would be expected to refuse to allow one part of your body to damage another part. And just right of centre, and starting to look forward, perhaps scene 3 can be scenes portraying a euphoric feeling of power and control, and a feeling of calmness and harmony of your entire being with nature. And looking right ahead, scene 4 can be scenes portraying the rich rewards of lifelong health that you can enjoy. Healthy, happy times, doing what you love doing, starting now and every day, long into the future. And in your storyboard, you can make the scenes your scenes that have a very deep meaning to you. And you can review your storyboard scenes and notice the physiological effects they have on your breathing, on your heart rate, on your blood pressure, and on your emotions. And you can notice these changes as you view your scenes. You are actually experiencing them as a real experience, and the physiological changes in your body are real. Something is really happening, and you are changing as you review the storyboard scene by scene. Far left, 1. A series of triggers for a smoking fireball. Then left of centre, 2. A powerful, undeniable urge to exercise self-discipline. Then looking forward, 3. The euphoric feeling of power and harmony. And looking right ahead, 4. The rich rewards of lifelong health that you can enjoy. And you can notice yourself changing, giving you a sense of immense confidence and power as you review the scenes 1 to 4 over and over, whenever you choose to. 1. A series of triggers, then left of centre, 2. A powerful, undeniable urge to exercise self-discipline, then looking forward, 3. The euphoric feeling of power and harmony, and looking right ahead, 4. The rich rewards of lifelong health that you can enjoy. And a little faster, 1. A series of triggers, then left of centre, 2. A powerful, undeniable urge to exercise self-discipline, then looking forward, 3. The euphoric feeling of power and harmony, and looking right ahead, 4. The rich rewards of lifelong health that you can enjoy. And perhaps watch again, very quickly, until you are happy that your scenes and the way they combine can have a life-changing impact on those who experience it. And perhaps there's something that gives you great joy that you'd love to do more of. If you had the time, perhaps it's walking your dog or dogs, or walking on the beach, or meditating somewhere very peaceful, perhaps on a walking track, on a secluded mountain on a beautiful sunlit day, with an incredible view, trees and rocks and valleys, and birds singing, and breathing in the cool and pure mountain air. Or perhaps reading an entrancing story, or watching a movie, or doing your favourite hobby, or being in a garden, or just being in the company of someone special, or perhaps just being alone, or something else, doing anything you want. And I wonder if you'd like to go there now. Perhaps become totally entranced by your own fantasy, whatever it may be. And you can do whatever you like. And while you're there, you can feel very confident. And you can use that confidence while you're there to perhaps think about making some changes to your life. Perhaps give up something. Perhaps you've done it before. You certainly weren't born with a cigarette in your mouth. Quite possibly your mother avoided smoking when she was carrying you before your birth, because she wanted you to have the priceless gift of good health. It may be that she did everything in her power to keep you from smoking as a toddler and as a little child, so that you can respect your own body like a temple and learn a lesson that can apply to your health for the rest of your life, and that you can pass on to others that you love, including yourself as you get older. And that reminds me of a story of a little girl who wanted her father to give up smoking because she was concerned about his health. And the father wanted to give up, but felt lacking in confidence that he could resist the cravings, until his little daughter said to him, "Daddy, if you drink some orange juice every day, then you can give up smoking." He figured her logic was irrefutable, and her confidence in him was something he couldn't deny. He couldn't let her down, and that was enough for him to try and succeed. And if your expectation of the behaviour of your body and the respect you have for your own body is the same as your mother's, possibly was, or even is, then there is hope for you and for your children or those you inspire, including yourself, and you can expect your own body to look after its own health in a responsible way, as a parent would expect of a little child who can understand and follow instructions and exercise self-discipline when temptations or peer pressure present themselves. And sometimes a little child can stray, go into a trance, sometimes go into a deep trance, go into autopilot, and the parent can help bring them back on track, and the parent can have confidence and belief that their child can be successful. And that reminds me of a story of a man who wanted to give up smoking and thought it was impossible. This man wanted the respect of his peers at work as a person, with unrivaled determination to be the best employee in the company. He didn't figure that controlling smoking was a consideration in getting respect, until he heard that one of his biggest rivals for the next promotion had just given up smoking. He immediately said, "If he can do it, I can do it," and gave up immediately. He was totally convinced that he had as much determination as anyone else at his workplace, and he was not going to allow anyone to think otherwise. And perhaps you've noticed that when you've learnt something before, perhaps a poem, or a nursery rhyme, or perhaps drive a car, You can learn it again, much more easily the second time, and even more easily the third time, and so on until after a while it becomes easy all the time, and you can see and feel yourself changing, breathing more slowly and deeply, your facial expression more relaxed, your eyes glazed or flickering, perhaps closed, and you can feel calm and confident, and your whole demeanour and self-belief changes and acts as if you go into a trance, go into autopilot, and you've demonstrated that skill many, many times, probably too numerous to count. And perhaps you can remember useful memories of learning how to do something, only to find you were doing it incorrectly, or there was a better way, which you learnt or relearnt. Perhaps how to pronounce a word or a syllable, or to use better grammar when you were a toddler. Perhaps you said milk instead of milk, please. Or you tied your shoes with a knot instead of a bow. Or you learned to wait instead of interrupt. Or how to perform a technique more correctly in sport or somewhere else. And you relearnt these things. You have that skill, that lifelong skill of being able to improve or change how you do things. And perhaps you can remember many times where you needed to exercise self-discipline to resist temptation for your own good and in your own best self-interest. Perhaps not taking something that didn't belong to you, or not betraying someone's trust, perhaps that of a close friend, or a parent, or perhaps acting respectfully in the face of frustration. And there may have been pangs, or yearnings, or cravings associated with those situations, but you still managed to exercise self-discipline, and you have that skill, which is a lifelong skill, like riding a bicycle, and you can use that skill any time in the future. You can suppress those pangs, or yearnings, or cravings, which can become less and less, and it can be easier and easier each time you do that, until after a while it becomes easy all the time. And you have done this many, many times, probably too many times to count. And perhaps you can wonder if your body can go into a trance, go into just the right type and level of trance, and remind you how to exercise that skill whenever you need it. And that reminds me of a story about a man who wanted to give up smoking but felt he lacked self-control. And his concern was that he tended to be overly tense and even unsociable when trying to give up smoking. And he didn't think that was fair to his family and friends. And this gave him all the reason he needed to give up giving up. Now this man travelled by plane quite frequently, often overseas, with many of the flights lasting 10 or more hours. And of course he didn't smoke on the plane. And he was able to be very civil and courteous to the other passengers and airline staff because in his own words, he had no choice. Now, different people find inspiration in the metaphoric interpretations of a wide variety of seemingly irrelevant situations. And this man was inspired to quit when he heard someone say that life is one long journey, and that's something about which we have no choice. And it's very interesting, is it not, how people who smoke due to a craving smoke exactly 25 cigarettes a day. And by some amazing coincidence, there are exactly 25 cigarettes in a pack. And some people consider that technically those people are actually giving up smoking 25 times a day without even realizing they are doing that. And the question arises, if you can give up smoking for 60 minutes, can you give up for 61 minutes? And if you can give up smoking for 61 minutes, perhaps you can give up for 62 minutes. And perhaps smoke 24 times a day and start the next day with 1 cigarette in the pack. And if you can manage to survive for 63 or 64 minutes, you can reduce your daily consumption to 23 a day. And if this process continued, it would be very interesting to see how long it would take before you're smoking less than 1 cigarette a day. And the pack was still full from the day before. And if a 5-hour conversation without 1 single smoke can be the most enjoyable 5 hours of your life, and if you can think of your life as 1 conversation, perhaps it can be interesting to see how much you can enjoy the rest of your life. And perhaps that time in the future without smoke can be so enjoyable and pass so easily, making you feel so comfortable. And whether it's sooner or later, you can know that that's something you can look forward to. And you may find it useful and enriching to know that in countries like Australia, the monetary cost of smoking 25 a day is about $6,000 a year, and much more if you get sick. In a household of 2 or 3 smokers, that's enough to pay off a modest home or go on a fabulous family holiday each year and enjoy it in good health. And it's very interesting and possibly useful to hear motivating stories of how other people gave up smoking, perhaps for different reasons. And there may be a part of you that has its own reason or reasons that can find useful messages in seemingly irrelevant stories and reinterpret them like a dream to provide a powerful technique or tap into a very useful resource that you already had and had previously overlooked. And that reminds me of a story of a man who wanted to give up smoking and thought it was impossible. This man desperately needed a new work vehicle. He was willing to walk over broken glass to get it, but paying for that new vehicle was seemingly impossible and would probably result in bankruptcy. until he realized that he could use the money wasted on smoking to fully fund the higher purchase payments. On this realization, something inside him changed instantly and permanently, and temporary cravings and pangs hardly registered level 1 compared to the pleasure of driving his new car. And whenever he noticed a craving, he just thought about his new car and the commitment he'd made to his family to avoid bankruptcy, and the cravings quickly became a thing of the past. And if you want to give up something, perhaps it will help if you pay attention to a little bit of everything, but take notice of a lot of nothing. And that reminds me of a man who told his doctor, "Doc, I'm scared of needles. Do you think acupuncture will help?" And I wonder if you've ever made a fearless commitment that you were confident you had the ability to keep for the rest of your life. Perhaps a vow of allegiance or protection or friendship to someone very close to you, or perhaps to yourself. And the power of that commitment is something that can give you confidence and strength and the ability to make other commitments that can help you achieve your goals. And I wonder if you can, right now, allow yourself to focus internally on the feeling that that fearless commitment can give you, and give it your full conscious attention. And you can be unconscious of your fearless commitment at any point in time. And at any point in time, your fearless commitment can be driving you without you needing to be conscious of it, like driving a car to your destination, without needing to be aware of the internal processes of your mind and your body and their harmonious relationship, singing from the same songbook. And as you continue to allow yourself to focus internally on the feeling that that fearless commitment can give you, and even though you are already unconsciously aware of it at this point in time, give it your full conscious attention. Perhaps you can notice characteristics of that commitment that are unique to you. Perhaps a feeling of warmth, or a bright colour, or a sweet taste, or a special fragrance, perhaps a smoothness, or a beautiful shape, or an interesting texture, or a beautiful sound, or the placement of a feeling in a particular part of your body. And you can embrace those characteristics, perhaps relate to them, enjoy them, and draw inspiration from them, and use them to give you the confidence and strength you need. And if you could give your fearless commitment a name, like perhaps Thor or Chastity, I wonder what name you'd choose. And as you continue to focus your conscious attention on all the wonderful characteristics of your fearless commitment, at the same time, I wonder if you can be only unconsciously aware of the characteristics of an unhealthy craving that in the future you'd like to consciously ignore. And you can notice its characteristics. Perhaps it has a shrill voice, a dark colour, or razor-sharp edges, or it throbs in a particular place in your body. And perhaps it'd be interesting to give it a name, like desire, or mozzie, or something else. And perhaps you can wonder what will happen when you introduce your two friends to each other. Perhaps they can see beauty in each other. Perhaps embrace each other and draw strength from each other, like a beautiful marriage, where one person has great power and the other has a great sense of direction. And together they can achieve wonderful and positive things and live a long life of happiness and good health. And it may be possible that all the feelings and characteristics of something that some people think of as negative, like a craving, can actually mean something good is happening in your body. Perhaps that's the feeling of your body starting to purge itself of poisons, or starting to heal itself. Perhaps you can embrace that feeling as a very good thing. And that reminds me of a story of a man who told me how he cured himself of warts, where the method involves putting Vaseline on the healthy skin around a wart to seal and protect it, and then putting a drop of white sap from a fig stem on the wart a few times a day for several days. According to the story, the wart is the home of a bacterial infestation, and the sap kills it, and it dries up and falls off, and the process is slightly painful, a slight burning sensation, which signifies the wart is dying. And after a few days, the wart and the pain are both gone. And it's interesting how the feeling of being nervous before an exam, or an interview, or a performance can perhaps cause the body to release adrenaline, and can actually be useful in helping lift performance. And it's also possible for discomfort to result in the release of endorphins, creating a very positive feeling, removing doubt and inhibitions, and allowing access to inner strength, and possibly explaining why so many athletes are addicted to the extreme discomfort of hard training, giving them the ability to overcome their challenges. And if you were a tennis player, you could be intimidated or even distracted or annoyed by a crowd which cheers your opponent. Or instead, you can embrace the crowd, even pretend the crowd is supporting you. And when it roars, you can draw energy from it. Use it to lift and motivate you to perform at your best, and even inspire yourself to new heights. And that reminds me of a girl who wanted to stop being scared of spiders. So she got some harmless pet spiders and gave them all names and stroked their backs with a pencil. And she says she can hear them purring. And she loves to wash their furry little arms and legs and hands. And in short time, she can see them smiling. And now she can't believe she was ever scared of spiders. And that reminds me of a man who was scared of the craving associated with quitting smoking. And it's very interesting that this same man religiously followed the custom of not eating during the daytime during the 30 days of Ramadan. And during this period, every year, he never smokes, day or night, simply because he doesn't feel like it. And if you have something that you want to control or describe in the past tense, wonder if you could focus on that pain or craving or habit or whatever it is one last time, just for 1 minute, right now. Create an image of all of its characteristics. Is it hungry or tired? Has it got a shape? Is it long and thin or round? Is it black or dark red or brown? And has it got a bad smell when you stand on it? Or a bitter taste? Perhaps you'd rather not know. Or a sad sound? Is it lonely or cold or hot and steamy? And can it ooze around or change position or size? Is its surface sometimes sharp and pointy, or slimy or sticky? And of course, you'd like to extrude that image, transport it to somewhere more useful, perhaps as food for a worm farm on the outskirts of a country town. You might like to break it up into millions of tiny particles and mix it with dirt. Dissolve it in warm rainwater and then add some softer, lighter or brighter natural coloured food dye, orange or bright green or blue, and some pleasant sounds, maybe birds, and introduce some interesting herbs or pleasant aromas, maybe berries or wildflower or gum. Or perhaps paint the mixture onto a cave wall or somewhere else as an unfinished work of art that you can watch curiously as you allow your hand to create a beautiful picture using your coloured pigments to paint a smooth shape and soften the hard areas with relaxing strokes. Complement them, adding beautiful, warm, vibrant colours, and permanently soften them. You may not even notice your original image being painted further and further into the background, slowly, permanently dissolving and getting smaller and softer, disappearing into the background of a very comforting scene as you create a beautiful painting that can last for years or a lifetime. And when it's finished, you may not even remember what you started with. Just soak up the beautiful new warm and soft, comfortable image that you've created and reclassify it in your unconscious mind and only enjoy that image and not be conscious of anything else. And now, I'd invite you to allow any of those useful things you've been thinking about to be soaked up, to become a part of your psyche, so you can achieve your goals in the future quite effortlessly. And you don't even need to notice or remember how that started. And perhaps you'd like to take a few moments to do that. And when you're ready, please allow yourself to be more and more aware of those things that are going on outside your body. And hopefully you can look forward to things being a little different